Good evening, everyone. Let's head over into Collectively Rewilding. There's my share. They do it so differently. It just depends on even what account you're in. So let's head in now. There we go. And this is the Facebook page, actually. We're over here in Mighty Networks. And that is an alternative social media network platform that is private. That is one of the biggest benefits of being here in Mighty Networks. There are so many, you couldn't even name them, but that is a big one, right? All right, so let's just dive right into it, everybody. There is a lot going on. First, we did finish the natural treatment for tree diseases, and my computer is being really weird. It didn't want to let my camera work earlier, and some other things, but I think I will be able to manage it through class today. I was going to factory reset it, but it was going to take too long. So it looks like I did not put the overall article, but let's go into sustainable organic soil regeneration, where I have placed it for you here in the unit in garden planning, I think. No, it's going to be garden maintenance. There we go. Natural treatment alternative. I apologize, folks. Okay, so natural treatment alternative. I was really thrown off base. It took me about 15 minutes to get my camera back working, so I didn't have the time I was planning to get ready for everything. So you hear the natural treatments for fruit trees is a nice little collection of all of the information that we put together over some really common diseases and problems that fruit trees and sometimes other plants as well, not always just fruit trees, suffer from these illnesses. Really interesting alternatives out there. There is an alternative, more than one natural alternative for everything they recommend their chemical interventions for, right? So really good. Another interesting thing that we may have some time to talk about towards the end of class, we'll have to see. This book here has an entire, I apologize, the all new Seed Starters Handbook has an entire set of illnesses that plants can suffer from and the natural treatment to correct those problems. And I've gotten that all marked down for you here. Let me see if I can find it quickly just to give you an idea of how many wonderful natural treatment options we will be talking about when we really tear into this particular book. All right, so this is something that she has titled as a little unit within a chapter, Spreading Rock Powder, something I may have heard a little bit about back in my childhood, but I have not heard about it since. And of course, this book was written in 1988, and it's the all new. So I need to do some research. I want to get the original Seed Starters Handbook, and I also want to find out if the original Square Foot Gardening book came out before the original Seed Starters Handbook. If not, I think that this Seed Starters Handbook was probably one of the resources that Mel Bartholomew used when he put that method together. She's a really good writer. So this entire page here, and it goes into this second page a little bit, are all about very specific descriptions, such as pale leaves turning to yellow, especially lower leaves, stunted growth. That means that you don't have enough nitrogen in your soil. And then she offers 4 different natural treatment options. So we're definitely going to tear through this book. I am almost, probably just a little bit past a third of the way, so almost halfway through this book. And I am taking notes for you guys, and I have an entire platform that I'm utilizing for this system that's going to make it very useful for you all. We've talked about it a little bit. I have the Square Foot Gardening notes and the Seed Starter Handbook notes. And as I come to completion with each little piece, I can share those as screenshots or memes, and the information is really nicely displayed. And I'm working on a variety of different projects that we'll be talking about, and you can follow along and participate with any of them that you're interested in wherever you are at home. All right, some really, really neat information. I've just begun working out the notes that I've already got compiled for you guys out of the book. But already there's a decent little bit that we can tear through, and that'll probably be coming up in a post in the next few days. So much going on, it's a little bit hard to determine what information I'm going to throw your way, right? So if you guys have something that is of more interest to you, please let me know so that I can work on that one with a little bit more focus, all right? So definitely great things going on out there. Now, the CR's mix, that is Collectively Rewilding variation of the mix that Mel Bartholomew came up with for his square foot gardening method. His ingredients are vermiculite, peat moss, and a blended compost. Only the blended compost is sustainable, all right? That is something he talks about in these books. He talks about respecting the resources, not wasting them, not overutilizing them, just a bunch of different things. He has different ways that he has increased in the gardening area. There's ways that you can follow his instructions and do more towards that renew, reduce, recycle idea. The Mel's mix was one area that he regretfully didn't have an alternative for. Well, we have come up for an alternative. Instead of vermiculite, we recommend rice hulls and or grow stones. Instead of peat moss, we recommend sphagnum moss. So when we're recommending more regenerative, renewable, all these different types of RE words, right? The environmentally conscious methodologies, we also want to do anything that we can here on the property at Collectively Rewilding. So we already have a compost heap going. We started that within a few days of arriving at our new home because we were so excited to stop throwing compostable goods into the trash can, right? It was just a wonderful moment to get to go out and start that compost heap. On top of that, with sphagnum moss, you can grow it at home. And I am doing that. You can't really see it with this camera. Let me see if I can kind of show you guys the arrangement. It is down here, right over there under my TV. I have 4 of the starts, and you can't really see it, but there on my makeup desk, I do have another one, my favorite one. It is the, oh my goodness, Plagomnium. I'm pretty sure I'm getting it correct there. I don't remember the secondary part of the Latin term. Sphagnum moss is what I had thought. It is a generic term that applies to a large number of different types of moss, all right? This here, I have 3 different types. Eurohyphum leptoholum, right? Who knows if I'm getting that correct? Haplocladium microphyllum, and Plagomnium acutum. They're all really neat. They're very beautiful. And I have those all detailed for you guys as we begin to tear through them in more depth. This is my favorite here, the Plagomnium acutum. Is that not just so beautiful? These are not actually leaves and stems. They are a different type of plant structure entirely. Mosses are older than the plants that utilize normal chlorophyll gathering and the reproduction components. These use spores, moss use spores, I believe. I'm just starting to tear into it, so don't quote me on that. I'm learning more and more about it. I've always loved moss, and I save moss sometimes by making sure it doesn't get too trampled. It's a delicate plant. Wherever I'm at, it's relatively easily moved to another location. At least those varieties that I encounter often here in the West naturally can get moved. And so if I know my animals or my family or other people in the area are going to be walking on something that's moss, a lot of times if I can, I'll move it to another area. So it's a generic term, and these are the 3 types that we'll be talking about specifically here in Collectively Rewilding. It was under $8 to get 5 different starts. They were supposed to be 2 of 3, but instead I have a really big of the Plegominium acutum. I have a really big start of that one, and it's really gorgeous. But you can tell a little bit. Let me see if I can make it any bigger. It doesn't really make the picture much bigger, but these are different looking. They're almost, slimy looking, succulent looking a little bit. And each one of them has a different sort of a texture like that. This is the Haplocladium microphyllum. And it is almost more like a juniper frond in its texture and design. At the appearance, they are very soft in actual texture. The appearance is deceiving in that. Junipers are quite rough and prickly. They can actually pierce the skin a little bit. I've been jabbed by them several times in spreading the wood chips, and I never realized how prickly junipers could be. I knew that I didn't want to go petting them or rubbing my face up against them, but they can be pretty owie filled. And so we're not only going to create our own compost, we're going to work towards producing our own sphagnum moss. And these will continue to increase in size. I'm waiting to see. I've never grown moss before. I've never known anybody that's tried to grow moss. I believe they're not only going to spread out, but that they're going to get a little bit thicker. The Plagiomnium acutum is raising up the most. It has gained the most height as it's renewing itself from being dried out for the shipping process and then being overly saturated, as I didn't see those instructions on the bottom of the box, which I really love. It's minimization of packaging, right? And that's just a super positive. All right. What we're doing here now and Collectively Rewilding is getting ready for all of the fun planting that's coming up. We actually have all of our, I don't think it's going to let me, there we go. We have all of our seeds in those 2 cardboard boxes there that I already had, and I don't even need to purchase, as well as a seed growing mat. Under that, the little seed starter kit back here in the background. And you can't really see it, but just between that seed starter and the cardboard boxes are the 4 different types of bulbs that we're going to be putting out. I talked to you guys a little bit about that last week. Run to your Dollar Tree if you haven't already and you want to get some really cheap, pretty bulbs to start off with and have forced bulbs. They generally will come to life in the spring. Crocus, jasmine, crocus, jonquils, oh my gosh, I can't talk today. I'm so sorry, folks. Jonquils, daffodils, all of those kinds of early bulbs. And they have some unusual ones actually at the Dollar Tree. I'm guessing that they're more towards the lower cost side of bulbs, and they're very beautiful. For $1.25, you get 3 different bulbs. We're going to place a ton of them up in the front yard area near our rows of Sharon bushes. There's just bare, dead soil there. We'll put the bulbs in and put mulch down and then have a pretty little area each spring. But this first time, because we're forcing them, they'll come up in the summer. And so if you put any bulbs in right now that are able to be forced, they will come up in the summer instead of the traditional spring bulb appearance time. Okay. Excuse me. Also, it turns out that it looks like we'll be getting our excavating done in the backyard earlier than I had thought was probable. I didn't really have any idea of when that was going to happen because, as you all are aware, I try to keep the costs as low as possible, and I'm very lucky. A lot of my friends and family come from the trades, so I can reach out to different people for questions and advice and assistance. And so my parents are going to be bringing up, or we're going to get a little mini excavator here. My father has a lot of experience on the excavator, so I want to pay someone to operate that for me. And we're going to get that all dug in. We won't really be able to do a lot more with the garden than what we initially planned as far as putting in plants and things like that, even if the actual soil is ready here, because it's a big cost endeavor, right? Even though we're going to get reimbursed, hopefully, for 75% of everything that we're doing, it's still going to be a good size initial investment. And so what we'll do when we have access to some more of the yard to begin turning it into excellent gardening soil is put down things like clover and wildflowers and just some very non-delicate, perhaps some native plants that are a little bit more rugged, different things like that in this outer area here that we aren't going to actually garden in. And we will maintain our garden still in the same basic area that we have planned here. When you switch over from the recipe of Mel's mix with those two non-renewable items and you go towards the renewable CR's mix with rice hulls, the sphagnum moss, the grow stones, these things are very, very inexpensive. I have not yet compared the cost, and let me write that down so that I remember to do that for you all. Cost comparison of the two mixes. And we'll look at if that is not only a renewable recipe, but also I believe probably we'll find out a more cost-effective recipe. And so we want to add it a lot of different places now. Originally, when I was going to follow the Mel's Mix recipe instead of CR's mix, I was only going to utilize it in a few areas. The raised bed, the half of it that we're keeping, the asparagus bed, perhaps for the currants and the trees, put a little bit in there because they're going to stay there. It's not going to be reworked soil all the time. So at that very specific set of locations, I was going to utilize a little bit of the Mel's mix that is non-renewable. Now that we have an alternative formula for CR, for Collectively Rewilding, we're going to place it all over. It's going to be so well spread out in our garden. It's going to make everything so much easier. We will have so much more workable soil and such an increased likelihood of success when we're starting off with what is nearly dead soil. It's just next to dead. Weeds can't even grow in the majority of it, but there's a very common weed out here. And again, it's probably indigenous, so weed is not the correct term, but that's how we use it. Not weed, as it's even called, K-O-N-O-T, not N-O-T, like to tie a knot, not weed. There's probably maybe 30 different plants of that, but this stuff will cover an entire yard with so many different plants, it's hard to distinguish between them, and maybe only 30 or 40 have been able to establish themselves in the backyard. It's very nearly dead soil. Utilizing so much more of CR's mix than we would have been able to with Mel's mix is going to increase the likelihood that we succeed by at least 50 to 75%, even maybe higher. It's really, really exciting to be able to utilize such a valuable idea without feeling guilty about it or thinking that I'm doing damage to something else. Rice hulls are a waste product of the rice industry. Grow stones are recycled glass, and sphagnum moss we can grow in our own homes if we really want to be as environmentally conscious as possible. Just so much joy in being able to participate with the ease of gardening that Mel Bartholomew had intended, but without having the guilt of utilizing non-renewable resources. It's just a wonderful feeling to know that we're not going to be damaging the environment. All right, continuing on, I get a little carried away, right? With Square Foot Gardening, they have put out their new book. I think I may have mentioned it last week. Square Foot Gardening, this is the 4th edition. I'm not sure if they mean since the original printing, as in this is like 0, all new Square Foot Gardening, the original book being 1, a 2nd and 3rd, with this being the 4th, or if this is the 1st edition and 2nd, with me only missing the 3rd edition, 4th edition. This is something I'll be tearing through, and this is something that I would love for any of you to join me in testing out the CR's mix formula in your own gardening areas, because I'd like to reach out to Square Foot Gardening, and if we already have testimonials, that will really increase our likelihood that they'll listen to us and consider placing the updated variation of this mix into their square foot gardening 5th edition, mentioning our community here so that we continue that outreach and interaction and trying to do it as little with as little cost as possible, right? So we'd love to hear any stories, good or bad, that you may have if you try CRs mixed out on your gardening property. One of the things I'm already thinking will happen, I believe I'm going to get some small amounts of vermiculite, peat moss, and I do need to make my own blended compost as Mel Bartholomew recommended with at least 5 different brands of compost. And then I'd like to look at what mixing his recipe in equal parts vermiculite, peat moss, and blended compost looks like after it's blended. I felt like there was not quite enough of that nutritive element of the compost with the fluffiness that the sphagnum moss and the rice hulls. I haven't started delving into grow stones yet, as we're dealing with really small planters and transplants. It would be really space consuming to use the grow stones. They're like gravel size, right? And rice hulls are teeny tiny little paper pieces that are hard to even distinguish from each other. So perhaps the components that are sustainable need a different variation than equal parts rice hulls, sphagnum moss, and compost. And that's one of the things that I'll be playing with over this next year before I even reach out to Square Foot Gardening to see if we can do some sort of collaboration. All right. And any of you that want to be a part of that, please let me know. I'd love to be here to help you and help you set up some ways to take easy, quick notes for yourself so that maybe you get a mention as well, because your initial participation helps us to test this theory out, right? All right. Moving on. The only real big things, I might have moved a little too quickly, I was worried we wouldn't be able to cover it, are the all new Seed Starter Handbook and a great book that Anita, who's here with us tonight, sent to me. This is Mini Farming, Self-Sufficiency on a Quarter Acre. I am definitely going to be making use of this. I have to start tearing through it, see what their methodology is, and see what pieces will be incorporated in here. We don't quite have a 1/4 of an acre, but we're not too far off. And so this will be very applicable to our gardening here on our property in Collectively Rewilding. Really exciting information that's out there and available to us. I have a lot of the literature actually that goes back to about the 70s with the same kind of ideology. And it's really wonderful to have read those initial pieces in combination with the new pieces today. It really will give us here in Collectively Rewilding a much broader and more uniquely tailored to each of our own garden styles, just giving so many different options within that ideology of not damaging the environment. So much has been done over the last 50 plus years that there is so much that we can utilize to build on, to find new ways to make things work in a better fashion while building off of what has gone before us, even back into our prehistory ancestors, as they tear more and more apart in these archaeological digs about what the gardening methods were. We can take that knowledge and incorporate it back into what we do today. Again, that will help with not harming the environment. These archaeological digs going back especially to pre-written history or thereabouts, those those communities, those familial tribes and different ways of organizing human society were generally very healthy in their interactions with their environment. They increased the health of their environment, if anything, rather than damaging their environment. So anywhere that we can take those techniques from our ancestors and apply them to today to produce more, to have healthier soil, to have healthier fruits and vegetables, and to retain water in the soil better. All of these different thought processes can get incorporated into our own gardens under the vision that fits our life and our property and our goal sets the best. It's just an exciting time to be involved in the gardening world, I think. All right. So are there any questions? I can definitely tear through the different things that we're practicing here in Collectively Rewilding. We have plenty of time to do either. I would love to answer some of your questions or hear what you're doing with the quickening of the season and the warming of the soil on your areas for gardening. Go ahead and just unmute yourselves, or let's check out the chat to see what Mr. Benny has to say. Hey, Benny, always good to see you. Okay. Oh, and thank you. That is so nice. Benny helped Vanessa, another of our members, get onto tonight's class. Thank you so much for that, Benny. Okay, let's see. The reason that growing sphagnum moss is an important part of our philosophy here is that I don't have to take someone else's sphagnum moss from wherever their property is. I believe that that we can keep this as a closed cycle here on our property. Obviously, it's not going to be completely closed. We have internet coming in, we have all these services. But as far as our agricultural or nature-based pursuits, we want to try to do the majority of that here. We don't want to take material from somewhere else. When you take topsoil, especially if you spend the money to buy true topsoil, what that is there is structured soil out there that has been either left alone long enough to restructure itself and become more healthy, or hasn't been damaged yet to begin with. And you're taking that soil from that space on the planet and taking it into your space. And we have to do that sometimes. We have come to this stage of modern living, and we have to work with what we have. So whenever we can, remove that, in my opinion, almost stealing of resources from another location, we do that as much as we're able to do it. And there are many ways that you can do that slowly as you go forth. Initially, most people, if not almost everyone, will have to bring in some resources from other locations in order to get to where they want to be with what they're doing for their soil and their property and their gardening. All right. Wonderful. Any other questions at all, everyone? We're getting ready to start digging into the soil. And
I have a question. It's on composting. It's on composting. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
And when you're doing that, can you use any food materials like banana?
No, not any. It's quite specific. The basics are that you don't want to use anything that's had any salts or seasonings, any dairy, any meat, any fat, oils, anything like that. If you just have a salad and the last little bit is left and you didn't manage to eat it and it didn't have any dressing or anything on it, throw that into your compost heap. If you've already put Italian dressing on it that has an oil in it, you probably don't want to put that into your compost heap. Now, I want to play with that going forward if I manage to get access to a larger property, because some of the things our ancestors did were called dark earth, or that's what we call it today. They put all of their natural waste, including bodily waste, carcasses, meat products. I'm not sure if they utilized dairy. I don't think that that was something that was heavily utilized in the Latin American tribes, but I'm not certain. Those types of things, they didn't care. They went ahead and they put it into these long, almost like what we're going to do with our Hugel Culture, where we're building a little hillock and putting compostable and already created compost and sticks and whole logs even into those berms. They did something like that in radiating lines outside of their village. And those lines are still the richest soil they've come across in any of these areas of the Amazon when they're doing these studies. It was an amazing method that they were employing thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. And we can take that and apply that to our own activities now, but they had all of the Amazon around them to expand in, because those will not be very nice berms, human waste, dead animal leavings that they don't need, whatever they are coming across that's natural, that's not going to be something you want to be around, and you don't want to utilize any of that for at least 7 years. Otherwise, it can create something called night soil. Dark soil is wonderful. Night soil is nasty. It can make you sick. It might even be able to kill you. So when you put something that should not be in a compost heap, when they do composting toilets, as an example, unless they're doing some sort of mechanical heating and processing, any kind of leavings like that need to be left alone for 7 years. And so when you are building your compost heap, keep those things in mind from your kitchen. And then the other main thing that you want to keep in mind is the green to brown ratio. And we'll just type that up so I make sure that I'm speaking absolutely correctly. And there they have it. Okay, green to brown ratio, 30 to 1. They're not really fleshing that out very well for you. Let's see. Okay, here we go. 1 to 1, 50% green compost and 50% brown compost. I think there are some variants. This is the one that I prefer because it's simply easy. When you are looking at the differences, and let's see if this website will pull up both of them. Looks like that's the visuals for this area here, and it's a lie, and that's no longer there. Okay. Your browns are the harder materials, the leaves and branches and twigs, apple cores, not the flesh of the apple so much, but the apple core, corn cobs, the leavings from your nutshells, paper. I think this might be like hay or something here. Then when you get into your greens, that's your potato peels and your coffee grounds and your grass clippings, any weeds that haven't gone to seed that aren't bad for your compost heap, any leafy vegetables, not so much a green leaf that's going to turn brown off of your tree, but a cabbage leaf or a lettuce leaf. They say they're showing sprouts, even hair, your animal's hair. And then I can't quite see this one up here. Cornmeal, I think maybe is what that is up there in the top. But it's going to be towards your vegetative, not your sticks, brush, hay, grass is one of the exceptions. Grass goes over to the greens, but these others out here, perhaps if you cut fresh hay and you put it in, it might have some question marks behind it, but grass clippings go in the green, whereas hay is generally going to be over in the brown along with leaves and things like that. Does that help? Let me see if I can get a good.
Yes. So like, because I have like a lot of bananas and like lemons that I didn't use in time and are going bad. That won't hurt it, right? I could put that in there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We put all of, we don't grow you know how you can grow food from scraps with like green onions being about the top one that's recommended. We love our green onions, man. We want that bulb all the way down to the bottom. So we take our green onions. We take what's one of the more uncommon things that I've put out there. I had coconut flour that had expired. I put a coconut flour out there. It didn't have any additives like salt or sugars or flavorings or things like that. It was just pure coconut flour and some pure almond flour. And interestingly enough, the almond flour was under the browns, right? Those are like nuts. Oh, but that would be the meat of it. See, that's where it gets a little bit complicated, but you want to try for a 50-50 ratio. So I am going to share this for you in Collectively Rewilding and tag you in all of that good stuff, Vanessa. This is a website that I like that has really good, clear, entertaining articles to read about these types of topics. And that'll be something that you can put right there with probably a list or some pictures that will help you keep in mind what is the 50-50 brown to green ratio when you're going through this.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that we can answer for anybody? I love answering your questions. It takes us down entirely different paths.
Benny's got one in the chat.
All right, let me check that out. And so just like in Lesko Health community, you're looking for that notification bell to get that answer about the browns and greens. Okay, so they're showing you a little bit of a variety here. They've got some leaves and some maybe, I don't know, celery or something. It looks like something I would not. Oh, those might be corn cobs. If those are corn cobs, those are going to be brown. But they have a variety of little things, and so they'll talk about all of that for you. Let's check out Vinny's question. Okay. What specific benefits does cultivating sphagnum moss in-house offer compared to sourcing it externally? Not only are you working towards not taking resources from another location, saving yourself money, but you also absolutely control the environment. You know if it was treated completely organically and naturally, because organic, as we've talked about, is kind of a funky word, and we're going to avoid all chemical interaction if we can. When you get the organic designation, there are certain chemicals that you're still allowed to apply in lesser amounts and some things like that. So it may be better, but they're still using chemical intervention in our system of organic farming. Here, we're going to go completely non-chemical intervention if we're able to at all, right? Let me just read your question again, make sure. So with the sphagnum moss, we will know it hasn't been treated after we grow from our initial starts and we really get going. There won't be the chemical introduction into what we're doing here, and I can still keep my costs low, because a lot of times, even though organic is not what we really think of as organic in our minds, it's still more expensive than non-organic much of the time, right? That does change a little bit. You'll see every once in a while that organic will actually be cheaper than non-organic, but it's not the typical finding, right? I also think it's just fun. You can do it all year long. So before I've even been able to start my seed flats, because we need to get a tray, we can't guarantee that we can get 12 hours of light once the seeds have actually breached the surface and they start needing that light, or for any of them that need a little bit to light to actually germinate. We can't guarantee a consistent sunlight pattern here in the Tooele Valley. So we need that artificial light, unfortunately, and we want to get a specific set of shelves that already has the light. It's the shelves. It's got wheels on the bottom. We have a smaller amount of space so that we can roll it out of the way when it's not needed in front of the window, and put it right back in front of the window when the light is good, and we can utilize natural light instead of artificial light, right? So those are all the reasons for me why it's a good idea. I would love to grow rice as well. Rice is a very water-loving plant. That's a little hard to do in the Utah desert, right? We're in like the plains, mountain, high desert area of Tooele Valley. So rice would be hard to come by. But there are places. Michigan has wild rice. I shouldn't say Michigan. I think of Michigan. But all of the Great Lakes states, you could check to see if there's wild rice that grows on the area of the lake that you're nearby, if you're near one of those lakes. And you can actually go and sustainably forage some wild rice. Get the rice and take those rice hulls and use those in your gardening, right? You are taking something from another place, but you want to do it sustainably. And then you're not contributing to the overall industries that are so much more harmful than if we were to sustainably be doing them ourselves, which is the overall goal as well with Collectively Rewilding, moving back towards what we can do ourselves. One, so we don't have to pay for it. Two, so we have control over what it is that we're doing, eating, growing things in, all of these different pieces. And you can make income off of it. If there ever is even just a regional disaster, some of the folks that were over on the East Coast in some of the nasty weather that took place, I don't know, about 10 years ago, they were without power for up to 3 years. And that was just here in the United States from a regional disaster. So having those skills, if something happens to the level where you're without for a few months or even a few weeks, if you need to then rely on yourself to access necessities, you'll have those all to hand right there. All right. Anything else from anyone? Let's see. what should we go over a little bit more in depth? Okay, let's go over the seeds that we're going to be planting initially. Oh, and there's another one in the chat. Let's check that. Mr. Benny's got good questions. Of course. Thank you, Benny. You have great questions. They really further the discussion, and I'm sure everybody's grateful when you ask the questions that you do. And Vanessa as well. That was really great information to have go along with this discussion. When it's not something that you're just completely familiar with, you need to know what you're doing, or you can have less than desirable results when you're composting. It's actually very easy once you get that flow and that understanding. But if you have a bad ratio, if you have too much greens to browns, it'll get really stinky. So there is an art to it, and you'll find your own best methods with what you have available to compost in your area and from your kitchen. Going into the seeds that we're going to plant, I believe. Let's see if we have another question. Okay, so the optimal light and temperature conditions for cultivating sphagnum moss, it's another one of those hard to say words, is very basic, right? No direct sunlight, so it does need some filtered sunlight or some other sort of source that can give it just a little bit of the indirect sorts of light spectrum that would come to them, right? It didn't really talk about avoiding artificial light that might be utilized from a plant, but I'm not really trying to focus any of that kind of light on them either. I already am downstairs in a basement living space. It's like a den or a study, a secondary living space here in my house. And we have a window, but it's down, it's recessed, and it's, at least 3 or 4 feet deep. So and it's on the northeast side of our house. So there's no direct sunlight that ever comes into that window, much less through into the room. But it is enough to brighten up the room without direct sunlight from opening up the curtains here, right? So it's perfect. And the temperature is between, I think it was 65 and 75. This is actually the box that came in. So let's just double check. Essentially, whatever reptiles enjoy is going to be great for sphagnum moss, which, as you all know, in the winter you might need if you have ever dealt with lizards. Oh, wonderful. Are you going to try the sphagnum moss with us then, Vanessa? She said, yes, this is going to be the first time I try. So, that's so exciting. It's so inexpensive. These little containers are at the Dollar Tree, any kind of dollar type store that you have. I would guess they'd have some variation. It's just little cupcake holders. And let me just show you. They're super easy to transport, all right? And they're stackable, but the diffuse light, of course, would still get through the sides if you stack them. $1.25, letting the deeper pockets that are created here hold the majority of the moisture that's sucked up through the rest of the CR's mix that you can see right there. And then I have one of the tabs open and outside of the little notch that it could be put behind, and then let's see, it's almost hard to get it into them sometimes. That's about the most difficult part though, and then locking it. But that would make it really close to, if not completely airtight, so I don't want that. So I have one little flap open, and I pop it outside of the little notch. I know it's hard to see with what you're able to from these types of equipment, right? I don't have the most useful equipment, but there you can see it a little bit better. All right, that little tab, the plastic is outside of it, and that actually has vented it enough. So far, I've not seen any kind of depletion or need for an extra venting system. If we decide we need an extra venting system, we're just going to cut some small holes at the right size for an Old Spice top container that we can turn to have ventilation if we need it, or turn it off if we don't need that ventilation. Again, super inexpensive, fun thing that you can do literally all year round if you have central air and heat, or a swamp cooler and a heater, right? All ready for what you live in. It's going to be the right temperature. And it's just a lot of fun, as well as being a money saver. And again, that quality control, right? Really, really neat. All right. Throw any other questions you guys have. Unmute yourself, Vanessa. Anyone else? What we're going to start in our first seed class will be those seeds that don't require as much heat. Your heat-loving vegetables are those we think of the most when we think about gardening. Cucumbers, tomatoes, zucchini, bell peppers, hot peppers. All of those are your heat-loving or summer season vegetables. So we're starting with our early season, the spring season vegetables, some of which can even stand some light frost. Not all, and we're going to start them inside and then baby them as we get outside. This seed starters book that I'm reading really goes into that in depth. There are a lot of really neat options that this lady has put together for us that we're going to explore. We won't even be able to explore all of these ideas through this season. We'll have to just kind of keep exploring them as we go on through the seasons because there is so much out there, again, that we can pick to individualize our own garden successes, because that's the goal too, not just gardening in our own way, but gardening in our own way to get the best success, right? So we have spinach. This one's just a pack that's already been opened. No reason to open another one. I have a couple of different bunching type onions that you many times will use for green onions. There are a couple of different names. This one's evergreen bunching. I'm not going to unroll the other. There's so many types of the basic plants: tomatoes, bell peppers, carrots, broccoli, cabbage. You can find so many different options. This is a basic sweet and mild yellow onion here. And then this is a little bit fun. This is like a green onion, but it's got this red color to it. It's the Rosa Lunga di Firenze. So it doesn't say, yes, okay, Italian. This is an Italian green onion style of onion. Really a lot of fun to play with there. Cauliflower, broccoli, collards. This is something I've never seen grown. I've only seen it for purchase, so this one's going to be fun. This is an heirloom lettuce, the Forellen Schluss, something along those lines. Doesn't that look yummy? This is an heirloom lettuce, Rouge d'Hiver, that is like a red cabbage kind of looking color there. Butter Crunch. That's a pretty common one that we see in our grocery stores. Red Acre cabbage. This is Lechuga Four Seasons, another red salad green. And this is sorrel or common sorrel. I don't have any idea what this tastes like. I've never specifically known I was eating it. It has a sharp lemon spinach flavor, and I love lemon and spinach, so that's really exciting. This doesn't show you the name, but this is mustard. And Ethel, who's here with us tonight as well, sent me a couple packages of heirloom seeds. We're going to grow this one this year, Black-Seeded Simpson. I did not have this variant, and look at how fun and different the texture on those lettuce leaves are. She did also send me, I believe it was mustard, and since we already have one here, we'll save those for a later year, but that is so fun. Thank you so much, both Anita and Ethel, for those super fun pieces to add into what we're doing. And finally, beets. All right, those are some pretty basic, common, cooler season vegetables that you can get started right now and that you can then do again in the fall. All right, they don't grow well in the middle of the growing season when those warm weather lovers do, the tomatoes and things. All right. And we have just a few more minutes, so we will go ahead and show you the bulbs. These are the 4 different types of bulbs that we're going to utilize from the Dollar Tree. All right. One of my favorites, this is the Tridalia. I've never tried to grow these. They are, I think, a pretty common one you see in California, and they are so beautiful. They are just solid purpley blue. Oh, it's gorgeous. This one is the Renoncule. Interesting word, interesting plant. It looks like a rose, but if you can see and you look closely here, it has a single solitary stem, and they are individual plants, not like on a bush the way a rose is. So this one will be fun to watch. Next, we have the gladiolus. Beautiful. These are my other favorite. Oh my goodness. They have about maybe 6 different colors or more in these mixes. Of course, you only get the 3 bulbs, as I mentioned, 3 bulbs, but I have several of each of these packages, so we should get a good mixture. And then instead of them coming up in the spring, as we've discussed, they'll be a summer bloom. Just so much fun to see come up in the summer. Finally, we have the anemone, and they are very basic, pretty little daisy-like purple, white flowers, a little bit like cosmos colors, right? And funny enough, they do look like the flowers on sea anemones a little bit. They're not actually flowers. I believe they're called polyps, but they pop up these little structures that look awfully flower-like, and these aren't too far from it. So I'm guessing that's where these guys got their name, one way or the other, right? All right, everyone. Looks like maybe Benny has another question here. Okay, so when I did the initial saturating and yes, oversaturating of the moss starts, they got very dark and slimier looking. I don't want to try to touch them a lot. They're very delicate plants. You can touch them. They won't like disintegrate. There are some plants out there that if you touch them, you will disintegrate them with your oils and heat and different things when we're interacting with our environment. You want it to be wet looking without actually being wet. As you can see from these pictures, I'm hoping that it's relatively clear that there is some moisture look to them. They have an almost slimy or succulent element to them, and that's good. But when you get into the older stage, the first little portion of tracking this that I did, you can see in the pictures that there's a visible oversaturation in the middle, especially. See how it's like a darker green with even some white to it. This is dying here. And that is what you do not want to see. You want to see this. What the instructions actually said was to spray it. Now, when I read this online, it was a fun little article, and I thought, oh, I can just grow it. Let's just try their instructions. They said just toss it in a bucket of water. All right. That's another example of why we might not always succeed if we just read some instructions off the internet. But it was fun. It was easy. I'm super busy, and I just wanted to give it a try. And obviously, I learned my mistake with this particular plant. It definitely does not want to be thrown in a bucket of water. Now, if you look at the pictures, even after adding a little bit of CR's mix, you can see that they're starting to get back some of the lighter green color that they exhibit now. The darker one, this one here that I'm highlighting, is the Eurohypnum leptodohalum, and it suffered the most. It really, if I hadn't done something as quick as I did, it would have died very quickly, all right? And so you will want it to have a healthy, fresh green, slightly slimy look, but not a saturated, wet, dark, like when you have a medium blue towel and you get it wet and it goes dark blue. You don't want to see that. You want to see that more light or medium green, depending on each variation. These are only 3 of the variations of what we call sphagnum moss. I'm sure there are almost limitless varieties across the globe of what we are terming a general plant. It's not even exactly a plant as we normally think of it, a plant like moss that grows in different strains throughout the world. I think that pretty well covers it, everyone. Let's wait a minute, see if Benny has another question. Anyone? Just go ahead and shout it out if you have any questions about any of what is going on here. Let's see what Mr. Benny has to say. That's what I'm learning as well, Benny. He wants to know, what does it mean for moss to be fully established, and how can one determine when this stage is reached? We're going to be learning that together, right? That's a part of Collectively Rewilding as well. We don't always have people to teach us these things that we want to know how to handle ourselves. And so we'll learn together when we don't already have an expert here to help us along. I've dealt with mosses I don't know if those would even be termed sphagnum moss because they're quite different. They grow almost like a hump, a ball, and then you can pick those up and you can almost replant them anywhere, and they can exist on rock surfaces here in the dry and arid West. So what I'm looking at as mosses in my area, not so much out in the forest, but more in the desert area where I interact a little bit more regularly, that has a completely different kind of structure. So I'm learning as we go forward with this type of moss. Now, I have been in the forest a lot. Colorado, Utah, they both have a decent amount of mountain and forested area. So I've definitely interacted with more of what would be classified as sphagnum moss, but it was quick interactions. I didn't really specifically look at the moss because there's so much more green growing variety when you're out in the forest compared to in a desert-like environment. I was too easily distracted. The moss didn't hold my attention as much as it did when I was in the desert environment. So we will learn that together. Absolutely, Benny. Thank you for your wonderful questions. They really do help expand on the topic. These are things that maybe I already know or maybe I don't, and I don't think to always include them for you. So any kinds of questions that you guys have, I really do love expanding on what parts of the conversation are interesting to you. So please feel free to join anytime, guys. Thank you all so much. We did do a full hour. We had everybody pretty much here that was trying to. We'll see about Mr. Bart. He didn't manage to make it, but everybody else that was trying got to class tonight. That's super successful. Fun topic. This has gone to a weekly class. There's just so much going on, as you can see, that it's simply too much to try to cover only every 2 weeks. So I hope to see you all next week. Again, that's going to be 6:30 p.m. Pacific, 7:30 p.m. Mountain, 8:30 p.m. Central, and 9:30 p.m. Eastern. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and feel free to unmute your mics and say goodnight, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Bye,
night.
Miss Ethel,
Thank you.
Vanessa. Have a great week, guys. Bye, everyone.